And Mr. Speaker, the cost of electricity must be made to be 0 shillings in this country, because a common mwananchi, wherever they are, Mr. Speaker, it is very, very hurtful for us to subject these Kenyan citizens who are coming from very poor backgrounds to high cost of electricity, taking into account that they don't have sustainable jobs, no sustainable businesses. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I support the motion. Kenya Power should not monopolize the supply or distribution of electricity in this country. Thank you.
For the students, I will give this chance to the Honorable Tiende, and wish you could take a shorter time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll take a very short time. First of all, allow me to welcome the students, the candidates of Class 8 of Riara School to Parliament. 2 of my daughters are in that class, Gina and Jewel, and to all the other students, I wish them well. Mr. Speaker, on this subject, I suppose the motion, the cost of electricity needs to come down. There are certain basic commodities which, if they're not manageable, then you cannot live a good life. Cost of fuel must also come down. The cost of unga must come down. And it is in this interest, and I'm happy that the Honorable Member of Laikipia has brought this motion. So next Monday, when we're on the street, please join us, because these are some of the costs that we need to come down. We want them to be basic. But secondly, allow me to disagree with some of my honorable colleagues who say the problem is the monopoly. There are certain facilities that must be monopolized, like Kenya Ports Authority must be a monopoly. There are certain essential services that must be a monopoly. The problem is not being a monopoly. The problem is the management. And one of the things that we must do is we must demand for KPLC, we must demand of Ketraco, we must demand of Kenyan that all the agreements they have entered into with private players must be made public and must be reviewed, because that's where the problem is. The problem is in the cartels that are dealing with our public institutions. That is where what we must manage. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, as we are dealing with this particular issue, we must also encourage the government to promote the alternative sources, so that we don't just rely on when there's drought, then they say there's no electricity, we must ration. And we have we are one of the countries in the equator where we have the sun throughout. We must use these alternative means because they're even cheaper. The truth is, there are people who are suppressing the use of alternative energy sources, and that's why the cost is high. Mr. Speaker, I support the motion. Thank you very much.
This chance will go to the member for Goretti, if he's in the House. The Honorable Ruku, you are out of order completely. This chance will then go to the member for Kajiado.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support this motion by the Honorable Jane Kagiri, the member for Laikipia. This motion is not only important, but urgent. Mr. Speaker, this comes at a very timely time when you're speaking about improving our economy and actually uplifting the standards of our people. Mr. Speaker, we know that the cost of electricity has gone so high that in most cases it has discouraged investors to invest in our country. When you also look at the production rates, the production rate of everything in this country is going down, and it is largely being contributed by the high cost of electricity. Mr. Speaker, when you speak of food security, it is becoming impossible to have food security in this country because most farmers rely on the rain, while we also have farmers who largely depend on water from boreholes to do farming and huge production. Mr. Speaker, it is now becoming impossible for those farmers to do production because every time they produce, the high cost of electricity eats into all their profits, and it becomes hard to run. not only to the large-scale farmers, but also to the small-scale farmers. We have people who produce food for their family consumption only, and it's becoming impossible for them to produce because every time you run a water borehole pump, it takes more money than what you produce in your farm. So, Mr. Speaker, when we speak of bringing down the cost of living in this country, we must address first the issue of electricity. Because in the reduction of electricity, we will have more farmers farming, we will have more people going into production, and as we speak now, the country wants to go into the industrialization way. We cannot go the industrialization way if we have not addressed the issue of electricity. Because every time we have industries coming up, they thrive for 1 year and they all close down. The reason being, they cannot run their productions because the cost of electricity is too high. Mr. Speaker, I think it's a high time that we all join hands and seek the reason as to why this electricity is becoming a menace, a thing that is affecting the economy of this country, and not only the economy of this country, it is actually contributing to most of the things in this country not working. And so, Mr. Speaker, I think this is a very timely motion. I support it completely. And Mr. Speaker, not only talking about the high cost of electricity, it is also the arrogance that comes with the Kenya Power. Every time we have power cuts, it's like you have to beg them to bring the power back. I live in an estate, and just the other day we did not have electricity, and every time you call, they tell you that they have to receive calls for at least 10 people living in the same estate for them to bring back the electricity. What kind of arrogance is that, Mr. Speaker, for a company that is so monopolized that also it is you also have to call so many times for them to bring it back? Mr. Speaker, I will also want to say that in the initiative of the last mile, I want to say that we also have some parts of the country that are not electricity enabled. Like in my county, Kajiado, we have so many schools, we have so many boreholes, and we have so many hospitals that are not connected. So in line with this motion, I just beg that we also have those counties or those places that are not connected, getting connected in the spirit of the last mile connectivity. With this, Mr. Speaker, I beg to support this motion, and I call each and every member of this House to support this motion in totality so we can see what happens. Mr. Speaker, before I forget, in my county we have private companies like the Kipeto Energy, which contributes to the national grid of electricity. But every time these companies contribute electricity to the Kenya Power so it can supply to us, we don't see, I was thinking now because we have so many companies contributing to it, the cost of it will go down. But the more they contribute electricity to Kenya Power, the more the cost of electricity is going high. So you wonder what is happening. We need to get down to this. We need to find solutions.
Honorable Kiborek, you can never wink to the Speaker. The Speaker is a man. We've just discussed issues of LGBTQ. Continue to finalize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And so I support this motion in totality, and I ask each and every member of this House to support this motion so that we can make sure that the production of the cost of electricity goes down, so we can see our production going up. We can see farmers farming again. We can see industries coming up and actually being sustained because the cost is affordable. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Member for Bomet East.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity. For your information, Mr. Speaker, I think last week I saw in the order paper that this bill was supposed to come, but unfortunately the LGBTQ bill came, motion came, and I had written the notes about this. Fortunately today, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, I'm getting an opportunity to raise on this very important motion, whereby I'm going to say that it has been long overdue. And I would like to say, Mr. Speaker, that if you see the bill whereby when you buy the tokens, I was checking on the tokens which I've been buying every now and then, and going to the taxes which is levied against every individual in this country, it is unbelievable. Because only if you see around 45% is what is meant for you after buying the tokens. And for some of us who are capable of buying tokens every now and then, I've been thinking about the common man, the voters who voted for us in our respective constituencies. Mr. Speaker, 45% meant for me and the government taking 54%, 54.3, that is around 55%, Mr. Speaker. This is the time whereby we need to stamp our authority as a parliament and regulate this institution like Kenya Power. I was asking myself, what is the point of a government entity selling to another government entity? You generate, which is Kenyan is a government owned, Kenya Power is government owned. Why can't we regulate or legislate in this house and make sure that even Kenyan can generate electricity and sell to us and sell to the country? This is where all these taxes come in, because Kenyan is selling to make a profit. We normally hear Kenyan has made so much billions. We are also Kenya Power making billions, and this is at the expense of every individual in this country. This is something which I want to say also. The issue of IPP, the independent power producers, we need to go down and depth into this and make sure that we know who are the real owners of these independent power producers. Mr. Speaker, I would like to say I've never understood all these taxes, because if you can see the taxes which are being charged on us, there is VAT, which is common, there is fuel levy, there is forex, EPRA charges, there is WRA charge, REP charge, and inflation charge, which is going all the way up to 54%, taken from the common mwananchi or anybody who is buying, who is using the Kenya Power. Some of us have even decided, I'm telling you, it was not long ago. Personally, in my house, I've installed the solar panels, because it is becoming unbearable. I cannot manage this Kenya Power. I'm a member of parliament, which I can say I might be supposed to be affording to buy the power from Kenya Power. But how about the common mwananchi, the voters who voted for us, these people who are doing the welding in all our villages around there? It is becoming unbearable, Mr. Speaker. I beg to support this motion. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Member for Game, followed by the member for Machakos.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support the motion by the women rep of Laikipia on management of the costs of electricity in this country. It is only in Kenya, I think, that we have beaten the law of demand and supply. Anybody would imagine that if there's a high supply and low demand, the price then would be lower. Or if there's high demand and low supply, the price would be up. To trace my steps, by 2017, the country was producing 2,300 megawatts. Currently, we are producing 2,900 megawatts. Consumption of power in 2017, in the evening when Mama Mboga was cooking, was 1757. Currently, the consumption has grown to 2243. What does that tell us? It tells us that the consumption or absorption of power by ordinary citizens is growing. And if we don't check, we may end up where we have more demand than supply. I think Kenya Power needs to wake up. And the government needs to put its foot down to restructure Kenya Power so that it meets the needs of the citizenry. For the last 4 years, Kenya Power has had 4 different managing directors. That should tell us something. That should tell us that the ministry either was sleeping on the job or there are a lot of politics in the management of Kenya Power. And the last exit at Kenya Power, the chair of Kenya Power, the lady who left, we raised it in our committee. There was a conflict of interest. She was the Director General of EADB.
But are you going to be discussing the DG of EADB, or do you want to make a contribution?
I want to relate an event in Turkana Wind Power and EADB.
I would suggest you don't go along that way, because you'll be discussing a member, a Kenyan who is a CEO of a regional institution without giving her a chance to respond. So I would suggest you go a different way.
Mr. Speaker, what I was going to mention is that EADB financed the Turkana Power. As a committee, when we went to Turkana Power, they were not ready then. But somebody in the ministry forced their way, and 9 billion Kenya shillings was paid for free. So even as we talk about the price of power in this country, we need to look at other players in the market who are actually stealing public money. Until we wake up as members of parliament and we say no to theft of public funds, then we can be talking about how to improve on the pricing of Kenya Power. Right now, we have the lifeline tariff. In the lifeline tariff, the charges is 12 shillings per kilowatt hour. If you look at the 12 shillings per kilowatt hour, which is given, if you look at the composition, the taxes are 56%. What does that tell us? It means the citizenry is paying a lot of tax. For example, on that tax, we have a Warma tax. Warma is charging for the hydro stations 50 cents per kilowatt hour. EPRA is charging 0.2 cents per kilowatt hour. I think it's important that this motion that the Honorable Kagiri has brought should help us as a committee in energy to go deep into inquiry on how best we can moderate the taxes so that the citizenry can enjoy supply. But the good news is that the country in the next, hopefully in the next 10 years, should be able to have a nuclear plant in Mombasa. If we have a nuclear plant, we'll be able to produce 4,000 megawatts, which would then put us in a foothold as an industrial nation. Right now, if you talk about having every household have electricity, it's not going to be possible. It will be a question like what has happened in South Africa, where there was a law that all the citizens be supplied with power. But now there's rationing. Each citizen gets 3 hours per day of that power. So it's important that even as we do the inquiry, we should be proactive in planning as a country on our needs for the megawatts that we need into the future. But more importantly, the variance between 2247 that is consumed every day and 2900 megawatts that is produced, we should be able to use the existence of that 600 megawatts to power our factories at night and ensure that if we power our factories at night, we can play with the pricing index and reduce the cost of electricity to citizenry. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Kabuchai, is Member for Kabuchai in the house? Member for Kandui? Member for Kilgoris?
Mr. Speaker, I also stand to support this motion. Mr. Speaker, I wish to thank the honorable member from Laikipia. I can see that good things come from Laikipia. because this motion now touches actually every citizen. In the years gone by, it was not easy to discuss this issue of electricity in the rural area, but now it is the current discussion. Because our country has progressed to such a situation that the need for power, electricity, is actually real. But, Mr. Speaker, many people are blaming the issue of monopoly, and I'm one of them. And, Mr. Speaker, if you look at the price of power in Kenya, in the compared to the region, Kenya is one of the highest, if in fact not the highest. In Uganda, they sell per kilowatt 20 shillings. In Burundi, it is 20.28. In Tanzania, it is 12.34. In Kenya, it is 23 shillings. So, Speaker, this is a very expensive price for power. And governments have come and said that they are going to reduce. I know that President Uhuru did promise so much that this power was going to come down. But the price of power defied the President Uhuru's promises. Now, even in the current government that has come on the ticket of, on the platform of reducing price, these prices have also defied the current government. And we have to address ourselves, what is the issue behind this? I know originally, we used to think that there was only one source of producing power, which was hydroelectricity. But now we have diversified. We have geothermal production of power. We have the wind production of power. And I know that there are some companies, like the tea factories in Kericho, the tea companies in Kericho, that actually produce some amounts of electricity, although they do consume and sell to the grid. There are sugar companies that have wanted to use bagasse or ethanol to produce power. The sources of production of power have increased. We are no longer in those days when we used to get power from ginger. We have power all over. We are beyond the days when we depended on the dams to get hydroelectricity. Yet the prices of power are still very high. It requires a study. I'm shy to say that we should have a commission of inquiry, but this issue of power has become endemic. Mr. Speaker, and this has produced some consequences. We are saying here, under the Vision 2030, that we want to be an industrialized country. The Kenya Association of Manufacturers, their own chairman, did say one of these days, it is impossible to have an industrial country when your power is not affordable, when your power is not sustainable, when you cannot actually have a cheaper way of funding industry. Unless we deal with the question of power, these industries in Kenya will never see the light of day. Industrialization will continue to be a dream far away to be realized. I ask Mr. Speaker that the Kenya Power and Lighting Company does actually take it upon itself to do this. I know when I was in China, the KPLC was the one that could be agreed, so they could be allowed to borrow money for power purposes, because in those days, GDC they did not have a good balance sheet. Ketraco did not have a good balance sheet. But today, it is KPLC that does not have a good balance sheet. Where did things go wrong? Now, speaking on behalf of the people of Kilgoris, it is the question of KPLC is a real disaster in Kilgoris. I don't know why power is never consistent in Kilgoris. You could be watching television. I'm not a great watcher of football, but my children are. And when you think the goal is about to be scored, KPLC switches off. And you don't understand. I was not in Nairobi to watch the demonstrations. I was watching on television. And then the power went off. Mr. Speaker, there is hardly anything you can do with power in Kilgoris. People who run butcheries have to have their meat being rotting. If you have kept your milk in the fridge, if you are using anything as a hotel, there is no power that is consistent enough to make your business sustainable. And the reason is that we are not connected. We do not have a transmission center in Kilgoris. We are far away from our headquarters in Narok, and our friends in Sotek have taken this advantage that I don't know how they ration the power so that Kilgoris only gets a little bit of it, and the rest of it goes to serve the Bomet interest. I call upon the people, Kenya Power and Lighting, to put up a station, a reliable station, to serve the people of Kilgoris. In fact, the people of Kilgoris do not even have a Kenya Power and Lighting office. They just have an operational one for technicians. You do not, if you want to ask a question about why the power has gone bad, they refer you to Sotek. Sotek is in Bomet County. We are a sub-county far away from our own county, but we do need to establish a connection where we can solve our problems with power. The last thing, Mr. Speaker, is about the billing system in KPLC. You can live in a small apartment in Nairobi and still pay power as if you run an industry on Mombasa Road. There is no formula. The guys come and look at your meter, and I don't know, they look at it with what eyes, and they give you a bill that you ask yourself, supposing I was manufacturing bread somewhere on Mombasa Road, how much would I pay? If you can just pay a lot of money for living on an apartment. And then it is not consistent. If all of you live on an apartment block, one is paying 2,000, another one is paying 20,000. When are we going to get a more consistent way? Probably not manual at all. There was a time that the KPLC gave responsibilities to NYS to do the billing, the reading for them. And in that time when NYS was reading the meter, the bills were fair. But when these guys came and they realized that they have to raise money from consumers, from unsuspecting consumers, they were given specific instructions. And this I must say, I suspect. They were given strict instructions to go and inflate the bills. And today, you don't know, Mr. Speaker, what you are going to pay next time. I know you might have a big house in Nyanza. You have another one in Nairobi. You have your own business. You are actually working for KPLC because the amount of money you pay for them, and then they don't even acknowledge. They are very rude. They don't have good customer service. They do not have a way of managing their customers. And that's why one time I said, Mr. Speaker, if I go to heaven and I find a KPLC person there, I know I'm in hell. Because how do you go to heaven under these circumstances? You are literally ripping off the people of Kenya, and then you are saying that you are doing your job. Mr. Speaker, this monopoly must end. And when it ends, Kenya will be a good country. I support.
I'd actually given the chance to the member for Machakos. We skipped her. Go ahead, member for Machakos.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. I want to thank in a very special way Honorable Jane Kagiri, Laikipia Women Rep, for the well-articulated, researched on the power sector and this motion. Power has become a menace, and it has become very devastating in this nation. And I want to thank her so much because she has revealed a lot. She took us through Kenyan, Kentraco, and KPLC. And what has come out clearly is that KPLC is no longer interested in serving the citizens and giving power to its citizens and to the nation. But it has just become a rotten den where cartels have taken control. How on earth does KPLC buy power from Kenyan at 5 shillings and sell it to its suppliers at 23 shillings. The same KPLC goes ahead and signs some agreements with the IPPS to sell, to buy power from them at 52 shillings. Surely. And then there is an agreement. There is a clause in this agreement where I think I understood it's a take or buy. Whether you buy the electricity or the power, you still have to pay for this power. Yet Kenyan is supplying power at 5 shillings, and we are not exhausting the power at Kenyan. It shows that there are cartels that are controlling Kenya Power. And this has to come to an end. Because power is a commodity which is of utmost need for our citizens, for our hospitals, for the industries, and also for the investors that want to come to invest in our country. Power is one of the few items that they will check on the cost of power in the country. So how long will we suffer? And that is why I thank the Honorable Jane for bringing up this issue. And we want to say this. We are the ones here in Parliament that are bestrode with making sure that the laws, the regulations that govern are well thought of, and they are enabling us as citizens to get the right prices or services. And that's why we have to look at this clause. We have to insist on getting the agreements that IPPS and Kenya Power have laid down, so that at least this monopoly can come to an end. Because at the end of the day, we will not continue suffering. Our country will not continue with these hard times where we know that power is of essence and we can control it to safeguard the prices, the escalating prices of every commodity in our market. Let me say, I'm here to support, and let's follow up this to the letter and make sure that the cost of power goes down. Before I sit down, in Mulolongo, Syokimau, there is another hell of menace of power in those sides. Anytime, every time, power goes off, and when you complain, when you call, it has just become, they have become immune. It does not matter, and it does not pain to them. Oh, how I wish the leaders in charge would do something about it. I beg to support. Thank you.
Thank you. Member from Bede South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support this motion. But before I do so, Mr. Speaker, I want first to commend our government because of the efforts which have been put in the last few years to ensure as many citizens as possible are connected to power. Mr. Speaker, in our language, we usually say that people don't count the goods, they only count the bad part. I want to recognize the good which has been done in this country. We know very few people are having power connections, and this now has changed, and I trust that it is going to continue changing with the efforts which are being put in through REREC. Mr. Speaker, sir, my only concern in the efforts which the government are putting is that we are not, as a government, we are not kind of business-minded. What do I mean by that? While we talk of connecting every school with power, Mr. Speaker, sir, you find a transformer has been installed in a certain school, and it is only serving the school alone. The community allowed that school will be left without power. And that is why power becomes expensive, because providing a old transformer for only one customer is actually expensive. If one has to pay the cost, they will not even afford. When we come to dispensaries, the same case applies. A old transformer is taken for a dispensary, and not much effort is put to maximize the use of that installation. At least in towns, the installations have been maximized. So my plea to REREC and the government is to ensure that at least every installation which we have put in place is used to the optimal. Mr. Speaker, let's go back to the basics. When we talk of power, what do we mean, really? Those of us who studied physics, there's a law which we are calling the law of conservation of energy, which states that energy can neither be created nor destroyed. You can only convert it from one form to another. And the debate before us today is about energy. This power we are calling just power electrical energy is just being converted from hydro energy, from geothermal, from solar, wind, from diesel fuel energy. We know some people also use coal, they convert it to electricity, to electrical energy. What we are addressing here, Mr. Speaker, sir, is what is the cost of converting this God-free given energy into some form of electrical energy. And this is why we are talking of the independent power producers selling energy to us at a very high cost. My argument, Mr. Speaker, sir, would be this. It is the responsibility of the entrepreneur to convert this energy to electrical energy in a cheaper form. It is not the responsibility of the citizens of this country to shoulder a more expensive way of converting energy to electrical energy. That is the responsibility of the entrepreneur. Mr. Speaker, sir, I support liberalization. But liberalization will not be the solution to this, because we know when we talk of liberalization, we are talking of market forces. Let the supply and demand dictate the prices. But energy is a basic human right, as we know it, just like water is. You cannot eat or drink if there's no water and if there's no energy. And if it is a basic human right, which is actually naturally provided, just like I've stated, energy is already in existence right from creation, then it is the responsibility of government to ensure that every single citizen of this country is getting access in an affordable manner of that which was originally freely given by God. Mr. Speaker, what am I driving at? I'm saying there has to be regulation, a clear regulation. And it is the regulation of this, the prices of this energy which will tame the independent power producers, even as we look at a liberalized market. Because if the government says the price cannot go beyond this because of the citizens, then the independent power producers will have to look for a way of making sure that they are more efficient in the conversion of whatever energy form. Mr. Speaker, if the government does not do this, then a lot of things are going to suffer in this country. We are talking about climate change. Climate change which is being brought about by the depletion of our forests. What will happen to the common mwananchi when they cannot afford power? They will go back to the old way of living. They will go and cut the trees. They burn charcoal because they must survive. They use firewood. So, Mr. Speaker, it negates the efforts of the government to say that we plant many trees, yet on the other hand, we are discouraging the mwananchi from using the source of energy which would save these forests. So I recommend that there must be regulation. Number two, if conversion of energy to electrical energy becomes expensive and it goes beyond the level of affordability by the common mwananchi, Mr. Speaker, sir, then the government should come in and subsidize. We are talking of subsidizing production. Energy or electrical energy, like we have discussed in this house today, is being used in every area of production. So for things to be produced, items to be produced in an affordable manner, the government will have to subsidize. If regulation will dictate thus, the price has to be high. Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, I want to mention a few things about Kenya Power. Kenya Power has got too many cartels which are operating with the organization. Mr. Speaker, when you apply for power, for connection, you find some strange people calling you and telling you they are from Kenya Power and they are going to assist you to get electricity in a very cheap way, and they start asking for money. And because of the need for power, a lot of our citizens have lost money through those cartels. Mr. Speaker, when we get contractors also, who Kenya Power these days is working through contractors. These contractors, they will come and install power, and over and above, they extend some connections, which are said to be legal connections, to wananchi who actually don't know. And these contractors, they end up asking those wananchi to pay a little money, which is outside the normal connection, and they give them power. Only later for Kenya Power to come and call these ones illegal elections, connections, and they disconnect the wananchi. So wananchi are losing a lot of money. On the other hand, Mr. Speaker, sir, you find that where a legal connection has been installed, the wires will be stolen at night, because these contractors who go to give power for these illegal connections, actually they don't buy the material. They are just doing an installation in one site, and when they go to another site where they want to give an illegal connection, they go and cannibalize those wires, they steal those wires. I particularly have lost my wires several times, Mr. Speaker. This is why I'm talking of this. It's an experience I have. Look at the street lighting, Mr. Speaker. They are given to contractors. They are installed today. After a week, they are stolen, and they are taken to another site, and the government continues to pay. Mr. Speaker, sir, there is a problem with Kenya Power. They need to review how they are providing their services. I support.
Ochonga, what is the problem?
Mr. Speaker, there is no problem at all.
Okay.
All what I wanted to tell you is that this motion is very, very crucial. Most members would wish to contribute to this motion. Looking at the time, I could see, I understand the standing orders, Mr. Speaker, but looking at the time, I don't see whether all of us are going to contribute. Personally, I've been patient here since morning, and I understand nobody is against me. So I only wanted, if possible, we be able to contribute for, let's say, 1 minute, 2 minutes, so that we can have all the people have a chance to contribute. That's only the problem that is here with me.
It was going so well. His 10 minutes, he had those 10 minutes for himself. And just to advise that in future, if you want to limit the time, you have to do it before the debate on the motion starts. I agree with you absolutely that the interest is a lot, but as you'd imagine, I've also just been following the list. I've the only member I'm going to give next, I've skipped him like 4 times because I wanted to balance. So I'm also just looking at the list and looking at how far you are. So allow me to just do it the way it is on the list, like I always do. The next member here would be the Honorable Ochanda, followed by the member for Gichugu.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let me make it short so that we can reach Chonga a little bit quickly. Mr. Speaker, there are some of these things that happen in this country that if you try to compare with what happens elsewhere, you'll be shocked. Mr. Speaker, Mogadishu, under very difficult circumstances, have been able to operate with light, with power throughout. And they don't have anything equivalent of KPLC. Why? So these are some of the reasons, some of the things that when you look at, you realize that we are in a situation where we are captives, literally captives of some of these big suppliers like this of KPLC. Mr. Speaker, if you want to reduce power, there are basic things that we want to look at. Number one, it has been mentioned, that we have to look at the issue of levy. We have to look at the issue of fluctuation. Power is costing us much more because of fluctuations. Right now, we are told, for example, and that goes also with the issue of planning and resource placement for purposes of generating energy. We've been trying as a country in different ways. Wind energy in Turkana, we've been doing a lot of experiments with the solar. And for the entire, what we call the Nyanza region, including Narok now, where Sunkuli was talking about, the problem is we were supposed to get an additional power from the north. That has been realized all of a sudden that it can't work. Now, Honorable Sunkuli, now that they are saying the connection must now be done between Narok and Bomet for us to get power that doesn't fluctuate from time to time. Look at that in terms of planning and resources that have been placed in the alternative ways of how to generate power. There's a problem in planning. And because of planning, we now experience fluctuations. And once you experience fluctuation, definitely the cost of power must go up. This is a big problem. When we are talking about manufacturing as an important pillar, an economic pillar, how do we manufacture when there is no power? How do we produce when there is no power? How do we produce when power is so expensive? So, Mr. Speaker, I think there's a bigger problem. This country must isolate some of the very basic things and focus on them such that we reduce the cost of power. It is doable. And if it's a matter of doing away with the KPLC, it's doable. And I've given a very good example. Mogadishu was able to run and has been running minus something like KPLC for a much more longer period of time. And when the other day,
Honorable Chanda, who is providing power there?
Independent arrangements, but regulated. Independent arrangements, but properly regulated. It's not the state doing it. And they are doing it so perfectly. The other day here, when somebody knocked our mask somewhere in industrial area here, in Dandora, the whole country went minus power for days just because of that kind of a monopoly. So we must think right as a country. The cost is even factors like Kenya Power is still too manual. We are in a stage in the world where you can't run a sector like that of Kenya Power in this manual way, where people are running for meters, running to reconnect, and things are so manual the way they are. It becomes costly, and that cost is definitely transferred to the consumer, Mr. Speaker. Let me leave the other minutes for who is else, not Chonga.
I wish it was. I'd already given the chance to Honorable Gichugu.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to this very, very important motion brought to this parliament or in this chamber by the very able member of parliament for Laikipia, Honorable Jane Kagiri. And that proves that a member of parliament does not only think about members from that she represents, but she's thinking nationally for the interests of all the Kenyans. And that is why I rise to support this motion. And firstly, Mr. Speaker, energy is a key driver of economy in this country, just like fuel. And when the cost of electricity is very high, then the economy is also suppressed in a big way. For example, I've been a member of the Trade, Industry and Corporations Committee, both in the 12th Parliament and 13th Parliament. And one of the issues that industrialists have been grappling with is the cost of electricity. And if, as Kenyans, we want to have jobs for our youth in this country, one of the issues that must be addressed is the cost of the electricity, because investors have been shying away from Kenya. Kenya is very strategic in terms of investments, but because of the cost of power, investors have been going to the neighboring countries where power is cheaper. And this matter has been brought up severally by KMA, by various players in the field, but it's an issue that the Committee of Parliament in charge of electricity, that is the Energy Committee, should take up and investigate why power is very costly in this country. For example, we've also seen in the bills that we've been paying, there are so many charges which are placed against the consumer. And sometimes we wonder, like charges by WRA, Water Regulatory Authority. Not every power in this country comes from water. Yeah? There are powers, we got power from geothermal, we got power from wind, and many other sources that are usually connected to the general grid for the transmission to the consumers. But Water Regulatory Authority always has a charge on the bill. So I think these are some of the things that needs to be investigated and to see where even these charges are usually taken to after the consumer has already been charged. Mr. Speaker, I also appreciate the government's effort through the current leadership of His Excellency that there's a very big effort to make sure that as many people are connected to power. Like when I joined Parliament as a member of Parliament for Gishugu, the connection within my constituency was about 56%. Now I'm boasting of about 82% of power connected to my people. And I'm sure with the current regime, this might rise to about 99% or even 100%. So some of other issues that must be addressed by Kenya Power is the power outages. I've been called severally from people from Gishugu that many areas have been disconnected, or their power outages. And they don't listen to the common man on the ground until I make calls to the Kenya Power. That is when they usually start running, and even as I speak now, there are some areas that I'm still following for reconnection. Mr. Speaker, because of the interest of time, I support this motion, and I believe this is the way to go, and investigation need to follow after this motion for the better and the best changes for the consumers of electricity in this country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Mosop.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to support this motion on this issue of electricity regulation. Mr. Speaker, electricity is no longer an option to the people of Kenya. It's a right for every Kenyan to have electricity. And not only electricity, Mr. Speaker, but affordable electricity. But it's truly unfortunate that the cost of electricity in Kenya continues to skyrocket. And so regulation of it, on checking as to why it continues to go so high, is needed, and is needed now. In the last 1 month, the cost of electricity went up by 10%. And even before then, it had gone up. And as such, Mr. Speaker, I support the member who brought in this motion, because it's high time we actually review the PPAs, the IPPs, because most of the owners of these IPPs are continuing to reap a lot of profits at the cost of Kenyans. The common person, this cost is passed to the consumer, is passed to the retailer. And as such, I am really in support as to what can we do. If Uganda is able to produce...
I have to stop you from there. You'll have your balance of time when this motion comes up next week. Time now, members, is 1 p.m. The debate on this motion will resume again when the order is placed in the order paper. Members, I then therefore wish to say that this House stands adjourned until Wednesday, that is today, afternoon, 22nd March 2023 at 2:30.